This is a Jmix exclusive.
I guess to get the ball rolling, how did you first link up with Pop?
I had a girlfriend, but she was in a drama class at Tamalpais High School with Tupac. I went to Tam, but I was already out of school, and I was getting into trouble, one would say. But I was running the life of a drug dealer, trying to make money, because I had gotten kicked out of my house, and I was trying to keep up with all the rich white kids in Marin County, and doing what I can. That's no excuse, but that's what I was doing. And so I was somewhat attractive back then. So I really got a reputation of having lots of cash and beautiful women and being a nice guy at the same time. So I was kind of popular. I was in circles where in Marin County it was like you stay in this place called Marin City, or you get harassed by the police. And out of all the hundreds of people who lived out there, I hung out with the people from Marin City, but I ventured out. To different places in Marin. It was just caught the police's eye. They would harass us wherever we went. And I seemed to know how to make the best of it. I learned how to deal with them and talk to them, and I was like this saltwater fish in a freshwater pond. It was like I was out of place, but I was enjoying myself. So that was me. And my girlfriend knew Tupac, and she would always tell me about this guy who walked funny, and he's always rapping. That's always showing up late to her plays. She was in these plays, and he was in these plays, and she would always complain how he was late and didn't do his stuff, and he was just a pain in the ass as far as the teachings of the drama class. But when he'd show up for a performance, he'd be raw, and it would be the greatest performance ever. She was telling me about this kid, and she would tell him about me, and by the time we met each other, we met each other at a party in Novato, California, and it was a house party, and the DJ was a guy named Clark Gable, and at the time, Clark Gable was the guy you go to do music. Him and Ant Dog had put out an album. Ant Dog was like the local rapper, and so Gable's throwing a party. I go to the party because I often went to his parties. And as soon as I walk in the door, this kid with this Gumby haircut comes running over talking about Kendrick. And I'm like, Tupac. And, he wasn't famous then, but he was a really big character. And he saw me as a really big character. And from the moment we hit it off there, then I think that first week he stayed at my house about 4 nights, just hanging out, checking out what I did, playing with all the women, having fun. That's what we did. We just partied all the time. I was actually waiting to go to jail. I had been convicted of a crime, but it was a bogus conviction. So I was out on bail, and I was just waiting to go to jail. So I was having fun every night. And, yeah, like I said, we both knew about each other, and we made the best of it.
Do you feel that perhaps because of your reputation for being a ladies' man and for the stuff that you were doing that maybe Tupac was drawn to you because of that, or was it just a natural connection when you met him?
I think it was a natural connection. I think the ladies' man thing was actually didn't come till later, because at the time when I met him, he was dedicated to a particular girl, and he wasn't really trying to fool around like all of us were doing You know, he wasn't trying to inject into that part of it so much, but he knew I had a genuine character. He also knew that I was out going places like everybody else hung out in Marin City. No knock on them, because it's a great place to hang out. But I was out and about seeing things. I was going places. Other than me getting harassed, we would always see something new. I think he recognized my spirit. And I always tell people, you know, Tupac was like Tarzan on a vine. You know, he swung to the next best thing. He when he got to Marin City, he found the guys doing music, and he swung to them. He hit it hard. He made himself a focal point, and they made him a focal point. You know, and then he saw guys like me and my buddies who were free-spirited and different than the average oppressed black dude, and he swung to that. Then he heard of Ray Love and those guys up in Santa Rosa who were actually dancing and practicing and writing lyrics all day and wearing costumes and, you know, doing it like real rappers would do. And he swung his vine to that. Then Layla hooked him up with Atron, who was dealing with Digital Underground. These guys have a hit coming out and about to be on the radio, and he swung to that. You know, then he swung to Suge Knight, and then he stopped swinging. He always was looking for something greater. He's always looking for something to master and conquer, and he did. But yeah, no, I don't think it was because of the women, but he did learn the women from me. He did learn how to be a master player from me.
For those that don't know, Marin City is nicknamed the Jungle. Can you tell the people from the outside looking in about Marin City? And because you brought up the police would harass you. I mean, is this a nice place to live? Can you just...
Well, there's Marin County.
Yes, sir.
There's Marin County, and then there's Marin City. Marin County at the time, I think, was like the 5th richest county in our nation. It was very lucrative. You know, a lot of old money lived in Marin, some new money. But Marin City fit the quota. In other words, every major city has housing. Most major cities have most of their housing by the shipyards, because most black communities were created because of the shipping industry, and they would bring the black people to live in these ship lanes and shipyards. And Marin City was, they were a derivative of San Francisco shipping and Oakland shipping. And Marin County chose to put their funding in this one little area called Marin City, their housing and development. I'm not really steep on the history or how all that stuff works, but I know in most cities they have several areas that you have your lower income, and in Marin County, most of it is right there in the one spot. So, Marin City is different because you have these black people living and being treated like, you know, like low-income people, housing people, but the contrast that they live in Marin County, this rich place. So they catch the bus to school, and their friends and counterparts drive BMWs and Range Rovers and Mercedes. The average black person in Marin City is very different. I really realized it when I moved from San Francisco to Sausalito, and I started hanging with my friends from Marin City. And I noticed that they were different from most black people I've met other places. They had a lot of pride. They were very friendly, unless you got them pissed. Quick to fight. They didn't shoot each other, but they were quick to fist fight. They weren't scared to fight nobody. And everybody knew everybody. So that was really interesting. You know, you've even had situations where you have cousin fighting cousin. all these little things. But at the end of the day, everybody was friends. They would pick themselves up and be friends. Marin City had one shooting every year for a long time. And that may seem like a lot, but one shooting in other communities is heavy. Marin City has your average black folks. The buildings were old. I'm sure they were built in the 60s, but Marin City wasn't dirty and slummy. There wasn't abandoned cars or garbage cans on fire. There wasn't muggings or rapings. There wasn't graffiti anywhere. A white person could walk through there and be very safe. So it's not like that at all. The black culture is there. The black culture is prevalent. There's some very smart people in that community. They come from great places, but it's not a rundown place at all.
Now, you had said earlier that you were the one who actually introduced Tupac to Layla Steinberg. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what was your relationship with Layla?
No. I can't take that credit. I didn't introduce them, but okay. when someone told, she was a promoter, and she arranged shows, and she knew everybody, and she was just really in the mix. And there was always a thing where us guys from Southern Marin would go up to Petaluma or Santa Rosa to have fun or mess with girls. Tupac heard about the music situation, so he was introduced to Layla, and I drove him there. I drove him. Like when he needed to be someplace, I drove him. I was his transportation. I could go. I didn't have anything to do. I had plenty of cars and plenty of gas. And he met Layla. He introduced me to Layla, and she was excited. She saw something. She saw in him what we all saw. And the thing you saw in Tupac quite naturally or easily was this kid's going to make it. With all his might, he is going to make it. So you can either stand in his way or you can get behind him and push. And everybody saw that. And Layla, being so deep into talent, it didn't take her a second to grasp that. And, she would say, well, Tupac needs to go down here to meet this person. I'd take him. Tupac needed to go to L.A. for something. I'd take him. Tupac, we need to go to this show in San Jose so he can meet Def Jeff and Alpha Rican and De La Soul to try to get on with them. I took him. It's funny, he went to go meet those guys. Layla was trying to get him signed to anybody, and she had all the contacts, so she would meet those guys like Def Jeff. I remember they all came to the hotel room to watch him rap, and they all did the little, the pretend to be listening thing, and said, we like you very much. Yeah, but no phone call. To this day, I don't think that any of them know that Tupac auditioned for them, that they could have signed him.
So at this point, when you're driving him around and he is meeting all these people, he's actively writing rap songs.
All the time. We stop somewhere, he'll write something in his notebook. Like me, I'd be taking care of some business. While I'm doing that, he'd be in my Suzuki Samurai bobbing his head, writing something down.
Now, at this point in time, Tupac was more political rapper. He was into the empowerment of the black culture. Would that be an accurate description?
Yes. There was a transition. There was two transitions. When he first came to Marin City, around the time I first met him, he was more of a battle rapper or comical rapper. He had a rap. He would write battle raps. He came from the East Coast where it was just me against you. I'm the toughest MC. You would hear Kid and Play rap hardcore like they're battling somebody, and you would hear stuff like Will Smith entered the scene with Parents Just Don't Understand. So he started writing. So he had a song called "The Misplaced Microphone." It was about his misplaced mic. He was an MC, and that was his thing. And as he came to the West Coast, he was slowly getting into slowly is the word, but as you know, his mom was part of the Panther movement, and he had joined something called the Junior Black Panthers. It was a Black Panther movement for the youth, and it was so he was a member, and he had talked about wanting to go to L.A. and he started teaching me about Afrocentricity, things that I didn't know, things that us as black people didn't really get or grasp or understand, things that KRS-One might talk about, things about simple things that are in your face that are wrong, but you don't know it because you've been living it wrong so long, you've accepted it. And he was so open to that stuff, and his mind was being open. So he started coming out with things like Panther Power and things about the struggle. And his rap started growing in that direction. So, yeah, he became militant, but he didn't start off that way, other than, battle raps and stuff like that.
My next question for you would be, do you know where the origin of the name MC New York came from?
I don't. I know that was his moniker when I first met him, when he was with Clark Gable and the One Nation MCs. They wrote raps about MC New York, and he was one of them. That was his handle at the time. When I met him, he was MC New York. So it had to happen in New York, or he was just, trying to live off the ride off of coming from New York.
So it would be a fair assumption to say Pac in the early days did have a love and affiliation with New York.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. That's where he gets his that's where he cut his teeth. That's where when he turned against New York, it blew my mind. That was my mind blowing number 3 or 4. Like, what? I mean, think about it. That one song he has called Old School, he says I wouldn't be where I was today if the old school didn't pave my way. Are you familiar with that song?
Absolutely.
He's talking about Curtis Blow and all these New York things. It's totally a New York song. And later on, we ran into Curtis Blow at the House of Blues one night. And Curtis Blow was sitting there drinking on a drink. He was a little buzzed. But he saw me walk in, and he's like, "Oh, man." He says, "Oh, you with your man, Pac, man. That song he made, man, that just blessed my heart. That was just so much." And I'm like, "Oh, my God, is fucking Curtis Blow talking to me right now?" This is somebody, I mean, everything I knew about rap, the history of rap, bars, writing, anything, Tupac told me. I wasn't a musician, didn't want to be, wasn't trying to be a rapper. I just liked hanging out with the dudes, and I wasn't yet into music. I got into music later, but now he told me all these things, and now I'm talking to Curtis Blow. I'm like, oh my God. I just want a minute of your boy's time. When you see him, tell him the old fella want to holler at him. So I'm sitting there saying, damn, I'm right here in front of Curtis Blow. And he's like in awe of Tupac because Tupac had said something about the ices and the Italian ice creams and Curtis Blow. And Curtis Blow was really impressed because Tupac was so relevant and so new school. And I go up to Tupac and I tell him, man, Curtis Blow is over there and he wants to talk to you. And mind you, I know Curtis Blow's history because Tupac has told me. I mean, I know him. I lived through rap. I wasn't blind of it, but I got a lot of my deep insight through Tupac. And so I tell Tupac about Curtis Blow, just wants a minute, come holler at him and talk to him. proper introduction. And Tupac says, fuck those New York niggas. I was like, wow. That was click number 4, breaking my heart. I didn't get it at the time. Now I see that as, okay, that was that heavy, that shoulder of Suge Knight sitting on Tupac's neck. You know, that was him being loyal to whatever the hell he was loyal to.
If you don't mind, can we go to the point where you actually become Tupac's assistant? When did that happen?
Okay. When he got locked up for a rape charge just as I was getting out of prison. And we had not communicated the whole time I was locked up. And to me, it was kind of like a slap on the face because I had been there and been every part of him getting to where he was. And for me and him, we both saw it different ways. You know how you're in a tiff with somebody and you think you're mad at them because of something and they think they're mad at you for something different, and time goes by. And so basically I got his address from someone, and I wrote him in jail while he was at Clinton Correctional. And you can tell the excitement. You know, I explained what I was going through and how I felt about us not talking. And the way he wrote back, it was like a weight taken off of him. He was just so intense in what he was saying to me. He's like, I thought it was this and blah, 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 blah. And I'm so glad to hear from you. You the only real motherfucker, blah, blah, you know, all this stuff, you know, tuning back into each other. And then I think we wrote each other like twice. And he said, he says, I might be getting out of here. I heard it from him before I heard it on TV. I might be getting out of here, and Suge is working on something. I'm like, what? You can't do that. You're signed to Interscope, blah, blah, blah. This is before I knew how all this shit worked. And he was like, what he said came true. And, you know, and so basically it was through correspondence. So as soon as he reached L.A., he called me and he said, hey, man, by that time, I had started my own record label and recording studio. And he said, hey, man, you still into music and stuff? He said, I need somebody around me I can trust. He says, can you fly up to L.A. and be my assistant? I said, fuck yeah. Hell yeah, you know? And I'm like, okay. So that was the beginning of the end.
What was your first impression of Suge Knight?
I was in awe. I had heard his name, or I had read about him. I'm a reader more than anything else. I read some stuff, and I wasn't sure how to pronounce his name. I'm like, is his name Suge? Suge? So Pac starts. The first time I heard Suge was from Pac. So it took me like 3 weeks to nail Pac down because him and his crew were just like all over the place. They go from Can-Am recording a song to Snoop's house to some party to some social event to Suge's other office and Suge's house, and then trips on the boat and California Love video. So it takes me like 3 weeks to nail him down. I'm driving a little bucket through the streets of L.A., staying with a couple friends in Pasadena. Finally, he calls me up, and he says, we're at the studio. Come to the studio now. And it's Can-Am over in Reseda, California. So I shoot over there, and everybody's heading out the parking lot. As soon as I'm flying in, they're flying out. They all go to this gas station that's right up the street from the studio. And Pac, I think he told me to jump in or something. I jump in a car or whatever, and I think we go over to Snoop's house. So I spent my first night with Death Row at Snoop Dogg's house. And then we go back to Can-Am the next day to start working on a couple songs. The whole time we're doing songs for the double album. So he's like, yeah, man, I want you. We go back to his hotel first before we go to the studio. And he sits down. He says, man, here's the deal. When we was young, you was the shit. You was the leader of the pack. That doesn't go here. He says, I'm the man. He says, I get all the accolades. I get all the bitches. It used to be the other way around. Now it's this way. I said, man, I'm not here for no bitches. I'm here to engage in this music industry. So basically I said, I understood. But he was basically telling me he was the star and everything revolves around him. And I understood that and respected that. So he told me, yeah, Suge is this. He said, Suge is going to want to meet you. He wants me to have an assistant. Basically, you're going to do this. You're going to do all the things that I can't do readily. I said, I'm with that. That's easy for me. And, we met at his hotel. He was staying at the hotel across the street from the Beverly Hills Hotel. Forgot what it's called. So we went to meet Suge, and I go in Suge's office, and it's all red carpet, red everything. Big-ass barbell on the ground, like he lifts weights or something. And he said, what's up, Kendrick? I said, what's up? And he says, Pac wants you to work with him. I want you to help him, help him get his things done. But we don't want you to go Hollywood. That was his main thing, wanting to tell me not to go Hollywood. Like, people come into the fold and suddenly they become bigger than life and the stars and everybody changes. But I had no problem with that. He didn't say much. He was a nice guy to me. He had a nice smile. He didn't seem nothing like the things I had heard. I had heard bad things, and he just seemed like, okay, like any other person in charge of some shit that I've met in my life.
I guess my next question would be, is he the big bad wolf that people say he is?
In sheep's clothing, yes. I came to see some badass shit, but compared to things I know about gangsters, it wouldn't be like, in other words, gangsters kill people and chop off people's heads. But this gangster's mystique was more of walking into rooms with baseball bats and stripping people down to their clothes, out of their clothes, and things that when you put it in print, it seems more exciting than some two-bit gangsters who shoot people's moms to death, He didn't do any of that. I've never seen him with guns or shooting anybody, but he struck fear.
Were you there for the alleged strip down of Marin and Big Psych?
I heard something happened with Big Psych. There were several events like that. I mean, one event, Suge Knight had me and Marin out in the snow on a balcony. But I don't know about the stripping of the Psych. But I'm not going to say it didn't happen because I remember there was a dispute about money, and then Psych just didn't come around Suge much anymore. But I didn't know about. I didn't know anything about him doing anything to Psych. You asked me if Suge was the gangster that everybody says he was. No, it doesn't. It wasn't like that at all. But I have seen him use physical force on somebody. I've seen him hit somebody. Has he ever hit me or threatened me with violence? No, not at all. And there were intimidating things. You know, everybody's all on edge. I've seen him question people, intimidate them, but it had nothing to do with me. So at the time I was nervous, but I wasn't fearful, and I was still trying to determine if it was going to involve me. Is this dangerous or what is it? And that's pretty much it. As far as the night with me and Marin, him fucking with us was not that elaborate or crazy. But it was enough to make me say, this place is fucking ignorant. I think he intimidated with all kinds of ways. But the story that you told, I don't know it to be true. As much as I wanted to hate Suge or be mad at Suge after everything settled, I had to ask myself, was he ever rude to me or asshole to me? Or I seen him in intense situations, but he never treated me like that. And he was always pretty nice. I mean, I've had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with just him and Tupac, and it was a lot of serious talk about music, but it was a lot of laughter too. Now, there were some shady things that happened, like business-wise, you know, that kind of threw me off. But as far as intimidation, he was much more of a businessman than a gangster.
Some people have said that there's two lines of thought, and I want to know your opinion if I could get it. One line of thought is that Suge Knight put a battery in Tupac's back, and Tupac was directing him to act a certain way. And another line of thought is that they were just a dynamic combination.
You mean Suge was put a battery in Tupac's back, and Tupac was acting a certain way on Suge's demands?
Yes.
Okay.
And the other line is
go ahead.
that they had a dynamic relationship, and they just fed off of each other. And I wanted to know what your opinion is on that.
Let me tell you, both are correct, because I think when Suge met Tupac, it was like one of his first times meeting a real artist, other than the artists he saves, like Jodeci and, you know, the artists that he saw come up and stuff. But I think when you look at when you look at Snoop and the Dog Pound, those were more homemade artists who were like street gangsters turned rappers, and he found their talent and he honed it, and he put them with Dr. Dre and made them something. But Tupac was a whole different animal. He came from a style. Tupac carried himself a certain way. Like Snoop is very smart. I've hung with Snoop, and I've hung with all those guys, and a lot of them are sharp. Nate Dogg kind of kept to himself, but a lot of those guys are sharp, but they're just like normal dudes. But Tupac was cut of something different. He was a philosopher / actor / comedian. He had a soul that was big. And when they met, they hit it off. So there was a natural handshake between Suge and Tupac, similar to when I first met Tupac. It was like, who the fuck is this motherfucker? And Suge, I'm sure, experienced that. I could tell. Suge always wanted Pac to be around. Pac was putting on his best juice. Like for instance, Jesse, if you met Tupac, he is going to make you feel so special and so awesome in his presence. he's going to give you so much of himself. And people who met him got that charisma when they first met him, and they loved him. And as time went on, he became a little more dull. But he was always big for Suge because he wanted to appease Suge. It's almost like he was looking for a father figure. And he really wanted to shine for Suge. And Suge loved it. Tupac was different. He was making this magic on record. And then, it's like this. He could go record a track at the studio, and then he could go hang out with a couple celebrity chicks and fuck them together, because he had the game, and these other guys couldn't do that. They just be like, they talk a mean game on a record, but they're just regular dudes. They don't have no game. Not to diss anybody, but Tupac was raised by the best from the Bay, and that Bay shit was very prevalent, and so that's the one side. But now, if you're a totalitarian leader, if you're Suge, which his nickname was Simon, if you're Simon and Simon says, we got to sell 2 million records tomorrow, well, you got to sell 2 million records. And like I said, I only seen one person get the fuck slapped out of him. Tupac might have seen a few more. But Tupac knew that he's supposed to do what he's supposed to do. So I think there was a part of Tupac that would jump, like a robot, like you say. There's a part of Tupac that would definitely want to please Suge. And there's another part of Tupac that just worked well with him because a real game recognized game, and real motherfuckers recognize real motherfuckers. So it was both. He changed more and more by the day. He was part of a gang. He always wanted acceptance. He always wanted to be in a family, from thug life, being a group of random thugs, ragtag, traveling thug circus, to death row, where everybody's wearing these red suits and we're down with the row. He always had that chameleon aspect that he would fade into whatever he was doing 100%. And the whole death row thing was kind of like a gangbanger mentality. And, you can even hear in the music, like Me Against the World is all about my struggles and being black in this oppressive society and telling how I see things and teaching the world, a softer side of how the black male thinks. And then All Eyes on Me was, you thought you broke me, but no, now I'm bigger, better, brighter with my family, and you can't touch us because we're unstoppable, and we'll kill you and piss on you and fuck you. It became something different, It became jewels and diamonds and gold and flossing. If you got it better, floss it. It became something different. And he always been that way. That's why I told you, like early on, he was the MC battle rapper. Then he was the conscious rapper. Then with Digital Underground, he's this traveling circus guy. Then he becomes the boss player. Then he becomes a thug. Then he becomes a multi-millionaire figure. I'm on Snoop's level now, and we're bosses. We're major players. You know.
During this time that you talk about, was Pac actively repping Suge's gang set?
Whether he felt it or not, he did not. He never said he was a blood. He never acted like a blood. He respected the Crips as well as the Bloods. When we were a ragtag moving fucking death row crew, but we had Crips with us. You know, so the gang was death row. It wasn't blood. Suge, I'm sure he was a blood at some level, but he had Crips and Bloods on the payroll. And yeah, Big Psych was a Crip. And you know, Bo Nitty, I don't know what happened to him. He disappeared, but he was around all the time too. He was a Crip. There was a couple Crips in there. It wasn't so much about affiliation. People respected each other's affiliation, but at the same time, it was Death Row was the gang.
Was the East versus West Coast beef, was it real?
I think aspects of it were real. I don't believe when it was going down, when I was in the thick of it, when we were traveling from hotel to hotel, when we were going back east to New York to do the Saturday Night Live thing. At the time, I thought it was really real. But in hindsight, some of the things don't seem too real to me now. In other words, I think people like Suge Knight and Puffy Combs, I think they really knew what was going on. And I mean, nowadays things are coming to light, like Puffy had bodyguards because he was scared of Suge, and he might have put a hit on somebody. But realistically, I don't think they were too worried about each other. Because I remember when we went to go to Saturday Night Live in New York, you know, everybody's on point. Everybody's talking about we're in New York. We're in enemy territory. Yet we're at Benihana's kicking it on the town. We're all having snowball fights in the middle of the street. And, you know, we're having fun in New York. When we're supposed to, before that we were getting coached up on how we should all be on point. But once we got there, it was just like we were on a big vacation having fun. So that kind of threw me like, okay, whoever they know more than they're letting on. But yeah, in Tupac's mind, once he said fuck New York, I believe he meant it. Like I said, he was in awe of a lot of New York rappers. Those were his idols. But once he signed up with Death Row, he was like, fuck them, and I mean it. I think Tupac, I don't know if he felt threatened by any East Coast rappers. I don't know if he felt like the war really was dangerous to him, but I knew that he was riding 100%, meaning he was down to be enemies with whoever to show his loyalty to Death Row and Suge Knight. And you know that was apparent. And when I said remind me to talk about Marin, he's the one who really made me understand it, because I had known when I went to work there, I had known the history of Chris Wallace, Biggie. I had known the history. You know, Tupac would tell me how he used to go to parties. They were just like ragtag dudes trying to make money, doing a quick show at a party here, show at a party there. In New York, when Tupac was cutting his bones, he would get invited to shows, you know, New York, Miami, whatever, and they weren't concerned with Biggie. He was nobody then. but he was one of Tupac's boys, and Tupac put him on. So Tupac got him shows. Tupac got him acknowledgement. Tupac paved the way for what Biggie did. And I think part of Tupac's personality, and I don't know if I could say it's a Gemini thing. I know my favorite artist in the world is a guy named Prince. And he kind of was the same way, where he wanted his cronies to blow up, but he didn't want anybody to get bigger than him. You know, like he had the time and he had the Vanity Six. And as soon as Morris Day started getting big, he had to chop him down. And I see Tupac the same way, where as soon as Biggie got big, he was a threat, or if he didn't create him, he felt like he didn't want him to be bigger than him. And that's something that Mo kind of pointed out to me. He knew that Tupac had love for Biggie, and that I really can't speak for Mo, but it has been said in circles that where Tupac had that beef, Tupac might not have really thought that Biggie shot him or had him shot.
I've heard a rumor that Big actually hid a gun for him in a piano that night.
For the guys who robbed him?
No, that Tupac had one of Tupac's guns. That Big had hid it for him when the police and ambulance showed up and returned it to him.
Oh, okay.
Is there any truth to that? Do you know?
I've never heard that story. That's something that I could have asked Tupac, and he would have told me straight up. But I think at that point there was the facade going on that Biggie was the culprit, and it's kind of weird because Tupac is thought of as this great genius, and he's this philosophical guy with all this wisdom, which he was. And he was very dope. He was very good. But there were some things where he just winged, man. He just said the most exciting thing at the time, the most interesting thing at the time. And I've seen it. I've seen him say things and they came out of nowhere. And now, could Biggie have set him up? Yes. Could Puffy have set him up? Yes. Could it just been some shit that made Tupac feel better to say they did it, instead of making him look weak, made him look I don't know. I can't speak. I can't say what it was, but there might be some truth to the fact that the beef was not based on real facts. But I know it sold a lot of records.
That's what I was going to ask. It's your opinion if it was more based on record sales than it was actual animosity.
I think it started off as animosity. Started off as somebody mad that they got shot and needed someone to blame it on. And people like Suge Knight and Puffy Combs saw gold in it. And they both have their media assassins, Papa G from Death Row and whoever they had in Bad Boy, set that thing on fire. And the media didn't know what to do, They'll take, when something is new to them, they'll take whatever they're given.
How did you feel when you heard Hit 'Em Up for the first time?
I heard it in the car with 2pac's. They had just recorded it at the studio, And I was like, damn, you can do that? It was kind of like when I first heard the police. I was also with Tupac. And I was like, you can do that? We can say that? And it was like the most venomous track Pac had laid to that day. It was raw anger, raw passion. And how did I feel? I thought that it was amazing in its creativity. I was like, he jacked his beat and on his own track, meaning Pac took Biggie's Get Money and on him on his own track. You know what I mean? That's like me going to your house in your living room. Now, how did I feel about it politically or
Yeah.
where I was sitting? I'm like, okay, I just landed in the middle of a war. What are we doing right now? I'm like, I didn't, at the time when I first heard it, I didn't know how deep the doo-doo was. But when I heard that, I'm like, that was my first taste of, hey, I'm in Hollywood with the real cats, recording at the real studios, and this shit isn't going to be fun like I thought it was. This is for real. This is like, it was like, why are we gangbanging? But he was tearing up Biggie, and I was loyal to Tupac. So if that's what we were doing, that's what we were doing. So get him good. Hell yeah.
Now, you were around him around that time. Is there any truth to the allegations he makes in the song about Faye?
Yeah. As soon as I met him after he got out of jail, and I met him in L.A. Remember, I told you it took about 3 weeks to reach him. He had made the one song about fucking Faith. He told me where it happened, how he did it. He was telling me he was even writing me letters in jail. And you can print this. I hope you print something like this. I had these Tupac letters, but the lawyer who was representing me when his mom sued me stole my letters, and I can't find her to this day. But I have these letters. Once I find her, my letters. They talk about all these people he had sex with, like Madonna, and and later on, I was with him when he slept with a few celebrities. But one of the first things, because he wanted people to know, yeah, I Faith, because he's trying to hurt Biggie. And we happened to go to the Century Club in Century City, and Faith is there with her bodyguards, and me and Tupac roll in, and it was just funny how she was in one corner of the club and he was in one corner of the club. And it was, the bodyguards were looking at me like I was going to do something to her, but I could tell that they were on point, on alert for me, although I'm not a violent guy or nothing like that. But yeah, it was definitely obvious that she had gotten used.
Now, that leads me to ask the question, Murder Rap came out, and Murder Rap makes claims that Puffy paid someone $1 million. Now, in your opinion, because we're talking about the East versus West Coast beef, do you think it was on that level to where people were beating each other over it?
Before, you talking about Murder Rap, the documentary that just came out this year or last year?
Yes, sir.
Well, that was the most believable documentary I ever saw. And in saying that, it raises question for me. It ties up the ends too well for me. I left that video thinking Orlando actually did shoot it. After all these years of so many theories, that in my mind, that documentary left me thinking Suge Knight was a hero. That he actually defended Tupac, or what's the word?
Protected?
Well, after Tupac was dead, L.A. got shot up and Orlando got killed. So instead of it looking like Suge Knight was involved in Tupac's killing, it looks like Suge Knight did what you would expect someone who's loyal to their homie to do, which would be revenge. Something like that. So that's what the documentary tied up the ends a little bit too well. Your original question was,
do you think that the East versus West Coast beef was big enough to where Puffy would pay someone $1 million to put a hit out on him?
I think so, but I don't think he would. If it was real, I definitely think so. But I also think like this. I don't think he would be so sloppy. I think Puffy is kind of like Russell Simmons, where everything he does is with a fine-tooth comb. It's very well thought out. He's very precise. I think if he meant to kill Suge, he wouldn't have missed. And I think if he really meant to kill Suge, and Suge knew it, Suge wouldn't miss. I think both of those men are alive today because they didn't kill each other. And that's my opinion. I know if I had the resources that they have, and I know if I traveled the way that they traveled, like let me give you a little background. When I went to death row, I mean, just from not being inside, you think that everything is protected. Everybody has bodyguards. Yeah, there were bodyguards, but the nature of people, regular people, aren't to hurt people. Regular people don't kill people. Assassins and people who put hits on people, or people who revenge some wrongdoing to themselves, those people shoot people. People who rob people do things in the dark. You know, they're not doing stuff in broad daylight or whatever. So my point is that we drove around freely. You might see me, Tupac, and Suge driving around in that same Caprice car in L.A. on any given day, you know? And I'm sure Puffy lives the same way wherever he lives. And like, you know how Tupac's music says we're not hard to find? That's the truest statement ever. If you wanted to get somebody, it wouldn't be that hard. So my point is that those who got killed, somebody wanted them dead. Those who are alive, nobody wanted them dead. That's a fact to me. In my mind, that's how it works. Because it's too easy to get them. It is. I mean, I know that sounds weird, but...
No, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense.
So you have to ask yourself that question. I know for a fact, well, I don't know for a fact, but I would assume that if Suge wanted Puffy dead, he'd be dead. If Puffy wanted Suge dead, he'd be dead. There's too many cracks in each organization. They're both infiltrated by snitches and police. You know, I mean, that's just the nature of life. So, and when I was watching that documentary, there's a guy, the uncle, supposedly who was in the car of the shooting. He gives it up so easy. I don't think they tell us why he's giving it up so easy. If you went 20 years or however many years knowing all this information, do they got you for some murders? And what would this make you do with the truth, you know? What do they have on this guy who's suddenly giving it all up and cleaning up the story so beautifully? You know, in my mind, if Suge Knight had something to do with Pac, he's my enemy. I can't do anything about it. I can't change it. I can't fix anything, but I love Tupac. You know, if Suge is the one that that defended him, then he's my hero. Let me say at the same time though, Tupac got Tupac killed. Whether it was reneging on the agreement with Suge Knight or beating up Orlando in a hotel over a chain, you don't do that. Let me say this real fast. People might think it was harsh, and I hope you make it come out right. But my feelings are this way. Interscope Records thought they had squeezed everything out of Tupac. He went to jail, whether that was a setup, which I think it was, or if they just were like, this is too much for us to deal with, they let him go to prison. Here comes Suge Knight. When all these superstars that supposedly had his back, and believe it or not, Madonna was one of the biggest people to have his back. She helped him bail out. Where all these other people who acted like they had Tupac's back didn't do anything. So here comes Suge Knight, and Suge Knight draws on a piece of paper this 6-album record deal or 3-album record deal on a piece of paper. Enter the prison, Clinton Correctional Facility. Enter Suge Knight and David Kenner or whatever lawyers were present, and they draw up something on paper, and Tupac signs it. Well, you're signing two things there. You're signing a business agreement, but you also know that you're signing onto the death row. And you also know that that's pretty much till death do us part, in a certain sense. In other words, if I came and got you out of prison, you better understand what that means to me and you. So when Tupac signed that deal, he knew what he was getting into. And I'm not going to say Suge Knight was right, but I'm going to say he knew he couldn't leave that easy. So I'm not going to say his death was his own fault, but he knew the job was tough when he took it.
Was Tupac planning on leaving Death Row Records?
I had not been in communications with him. I talked to him in the last 6 months. Before he died, I talked to him one time, and that was on the phone, and that conversation was real simple. It was like, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? I'm doing all right. How you doing? Good. Everything all right with your fam? Yep. Everything all right with your fam? Yep. It was lackluster. It was no bubble. As opposed to when he first got out of jail. Kendrick, what's up, man? Get down here. Blah, 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 blah. It was like really dry, and he didn't seem like himself. It was, and of course, like while I was there, that was all the luster was starting to wear off. You know, it was more work than play.
Why did you not staying with this? What was the fallout?
The fallout was when we got into it with Suge Knight, and Suge Knight started disrespecting or putting us in bad positions, me and Tupac's crew. We all kind of hung different. Like you had the different crews. You had DJ Quick and his crew. You had the Dog Pound. Nate Dogg kind of hung by himself. Dr. Dre, they had just banned him and abolished him, and You had the Dog Pound and Snoop Dogg, and all these different factions. Well, Tupac was me, Tupac, and the Outlaws with Bo Nitty and Syke. We all kind of hung together, and it almost seemed like what I didn't know at the time was they were trying to force a wedge. They didn't want someone like me around Tupac. They didn't want Mo, his brother, around Tupac. They didn't want outsiders around Tupac. And they were pushing us away. And we would tell Tupac this shit, and his response was, basically it was him justifying their actions over ours. It was almost like where if it was anybody else, he would raise hell because he was a great spokesman. He was like, motherfuckers, But when it came to Suge, he just rolled with the punches and came up with some bullshit. If you know Tupac, when he's telling you something straight that's bigger than life and real, or if he's leading you a line of bullshit. He didn't have our back. And I'm like, you know what? The stakes are too high. Getting too high. It's not fun. I'm not having fun. They're not paying me when they're supposed to. They're trying to pay us with gifts and shit, and not cash. And this isn't what I thought it would be.
Now, I've talked to a lot of people, heard a lot of stories about people that work at Death Row Records. Were beatings commonplace? Did that really happen?
I don't think so. I think that when we were recording, the mood was fun. I think things were lighthearted. I heard about beatings from people once I got back here. Like when I got back to Sacramento, I heard that some guy got beat. And I heard a lot of shit at the fan after we left. Studios got tore up, and I heard a lot of shit. But when I was there, I remember I saw one thing. And it was almost like Suge was playing around with this one guy. He kind of felt this dude up pretty good. And he was trying to make a point. He was trying to keep everybody on task. And I think we were in New Orleans. And it was a situation where these girls had gotten in trouble. They got kicked out of Bourbon Street or whatever. And there was some guy who happened to see the girls getting in trouble. So Suge made an example out of that guy. and it was kind of uncalled for, and DJ Quick ended up saving that guy's life. I don't know if Suge was really going to hurt him, but he banged him up pretty good. But it wasn't a normal thing at all. It wasn't. It was just this one particular time that I remember, and that was because something happened that created that. I don't know. Like I was saying, I people talk about it like it was violence going on, but I ran a recording studio myself, and I seen more shit all the time at my place than I've seen at his place. You know? You see shit all the time. And that's the thing that struck me. Everybody talked about Suge, but you never seen any guns or him shooting at anybody or anything like that. You just saw him act a fool every once in a while. And it's kind of common in the black community to do that, especially if you're the lead dog. And for the record, as much as I wanted to hate Suge or be mad at Suge after everything settled, I had to ask myself, was he ever rude to me or asked to me or I seen him in intense situations, but he never treated me like that. And he was always pretty nice. I mean, I've had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with just him and Tupac, and there was was a lot of serious talk about music, but it was a lot of laughter too. Now, there were some shady things that happened, like business-wise, that kind of threw me off. But as far as intimidation, he was much more of a businessman than a gangster.
Some people have said that there's two lines of thought, and I want to know your opinion if I could get it. One line of thought is that Suge Knight put a battery in Tupac's back, and Tupac was directing him to act a certain way. And another line of thought is that they were just a dynamic combination.
You mean Suge was put a battery in Tupac's back, and Tupac was acting a certain way on Suge's demands?
Yes.
Okay.
And the other line
okay, go
is
ahead.
that they had a dynamic relationship, and they just fed off of each other. And I wanted to know what your opinion is on that.
Both are correct. Let me tell you, both are correct, because I think when Suge met Tupac, it was like one of his first times meeting a real artist, other than the artists he saves, like Jodeci and the artists that he saw come up and stuff. But I think when you look at when you look at Snoop and the Dog Pound, those were more homemade artists who were like street gangsters turned rappers, and he found their talent and he honed it, and he put them with Dr. Dre and made them something. But Tupac was a whole different animal. He came from a style. Tupac carried himself a certain way. Like Snoop is very smart. I've hung with Snoop, and I've hung with all those guys, and a lot of them are sharp. Nate Dogg kind of kept to himself, but a lot of those guys are sharp, but they're just like normal dudes. But Tupac was cut of something different. He was a philosopher / actor / comedian. He had a soul that was big. And when they met, they hit it off. So there was a natural handshake between Suge and Tupac, similar to when I first met Tupac. It was like, who the fuck is this motherfucker? And Suge, I'm sure, experienced that. I could tell. Suge always wanted Pac to be around. Pac was putting on his best juice. Like for instance, Jesse, if you met Tupac, or you did, but if you say you had lunch with him or whatever, he is going to make you feel so special and so awesome in his presence. He's going to give you so much of himself. And people who met him got that charisma when they first met him, and they loved him. And as time went on, he became a little more dull. But he was always big for Suge because he wanted to appease Suge. It's almost like he was looking for a father figure. And he really wanted to shine for Suge. And Suge loved it. Tupac was different. He was making this magic on record, and then, it's like this. He could go record a track at the studio, and then he could go hang out with a couple celebrity chicks, because he had the game, and these other guys couldn't do that. They just be like, they talk a mean game on a record, but they're just regular dudes. They don't have no game. Not to diss anybody, but Tupac was raised by the best from the Bay, and that Bay shit was very prevalent, and so that's the one side. But now, if you're a totalitarian leader, if you're Suge, which his nickname was Simon. If you're Simon, and Simon says, we got to sell 2 million records tomorrow, well, you got to sell 2 million records. And like I said, I only seen one person get the belt slapped out of him, Tupac might have seen a few more, but Tupac knew that he's supposed to do what he's supposed to do. So I think there was a part of Tupac that would jump, like a robot, like you say. There's a part of Tupac that would definitely want to please Suge. And there's another part of Tupac that just worked well with him because a real game recognized game and real motherfuckers recognized real motherfuckers. So it was both. I don't mean to diss any of them people. There's like one person I have beef with, and it's the person who got me sued. That's Molly. I don't know if you know her story yet.
No, I don't. I was going to ask you about that album and about the lawsuit and about all that.
There's just so much. We go around one corner and so much can spill out. A year from now, you're going to be like, why didn't you tell me about this? I'm like, I don't know. We didn't get this. But, yeah. There's a lot of stuff.
Well, in 1997, I'm going to take it back a little bit. In 97, we heard of the Tupac Amaru Shakur tribute. What's the story behind that album? And what happened to it?
Okay. I'm going to try to keep it really short, and let me say it really fast. All right. Well, let's back up a little bit. I had just talked to Tupac about 3 months before, and I was coming home from a nice evening with a nice young lady, and somebody yells over my balcony, Tupac was shot. So, now a little backstory. Before I left working for Tupac as his assistant, I had hired an old girlfriend of mine that Tupac knew to clean his laundry. And he said, man, you need to help me find somebody who can, not a housekeeper, but someone who could do my laundry and stuff like that, who I can trust that can go in my pockets and stuff. If I leave money or whatever, the right thing will happen, And I called up Molly, and basically I get her this job cleaning up for him, taking care of the affairs that I don't take care of. And when I left, she started being his assistant. She didn't really travel like I did, but she made phone calls and made things happen. So as soon as I hear the word that he got shot, I called her immediately and said, oh, my God, what's happening? So she became my liaison. And the peculiar thing that happened was, so I'm calling her as I hear stuff. She's telling me, I'm like, Molly, should I fly to Vegas? I wanted to fly in and be with the boys and just, be there. She says, no, it's looking good. He just woke up. And I'm like, oh, my God. I'm telling everybody in Sacramento, he's going to be all right. I called people, said this, and then the news came on that he was dead. That was my first thing, like, was she in shock? Why did she tell me that? Was she just trying to not make me come to Las Vegas? Because she's trying to keep me out. I don't know what she knows or why that was, but that was very strange. But I didn't think nothing of it at the time. I was just like, oh, Tupac's dead. I go into a tailspin. I lock myself in a room, and I'm just playing so many tears and I'm just playing his songs. I locked myself up for about 10 hours. Couldn't believe it. Anyway, so as weeks go on, we're hearing all kinds of stuff on the news. People are saying that his mom is broke. Suge Knight has all this money and she's broke. And friends are coming to my studio saying, hey man, let's make a tribute album for her. Let's make a way for her to get some money. And I'm like, okay. So I started letting all these guys record in my studio. I'm producing this album. And I called Molly and I said, hey Molly, we want to do this thing for Tupac's mom. Can you give me her number or whatever? And she wouldn't. She said, well, send me what you have to this address, and I'll give it to the lawyers, and we'll figure out how we can get the money to her or whatever. No, I think the question then was, I wanted her input. I wanted Afeni's input on how to make this thing special for her. That's what our original thing was. Oh boy. So about a week later, after sending, we sent a one sheet. Keep in mind, we haven't released anything, put anything together, but we put together a one sheet and sent it out to him, the tribute album for Tupac, Amaru Shakur, blah, blah, blah. And a week later, I got a cease and desist letter that talked about things like all my assets, my family, blah, blah, blah. And they set up a hearing. And at the time, I'm really ignorant to how all that worked. If I knew now what I knew then, I would have killed those guys. Not killed them like physically, but destroyed them in court. Because they didn't have a leg to stand on. But at the time, my father had IRS problems, and I was in charge of his trust, which was all his properties and stuff. And they were threatening to sue me. And they were talking about these properties and things. And I just wanted it to be over with. And so they're suing me. They come to Sacramento. They set up all these hearings. I go into the lawyer's office. They got these stick figures of Tupac. All these lawyers who didn't even know anything about Tupac, they're laughing and making jokes about Tupac. And I'm sitting there and I'm getting interviewed and asked all these questions. And, I'm telling it like it is. I'm like, I supported Tupac when no one else did. I was his mom when his mom wasn't around. I don't know if someone was offended by that, but I said that, and it was true. I was there for him. I was there for him in a big way. When he died owing me money. When he came up, a lot of it was on my buck. When he slept on my couch. When he taught me how to cook fried chicken that I bought. That's how it was. And in the end, it was similar to the same way because Death Row wasn't giving them all their money, and I had money. So I was busting bread sometimes. So it wasn't inconceivable that the mom didn't have any money. Come to find out later, she was a millionaire. But at the time, we thought she was broke. And these lawyers were hitting me from every angle. And I was like, man, I just want this to go away. And they wanted to know what I had, what masters, what videos, what blah, 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 blah. And I told them. And she said she wanted my original masters that I recorded of him. I had the first recording he ever made, and I had these other masters with these kids he was producing. But he had put his voice on the track. And to make the lawsuit go away, I agreed, hey, I'll give you anything you want. I have nothing but love for his mother. We're on the same team, right? So I want to give her all this stuff. And I said, all I want is a conversation with her. So one thing I left out was they put me on the phone with her one time, and she got on the phone and she started cussing me out. Kendrick, how dare you do this and say this and do this? And then she hung up on me. I'm like, what the f-? So all this time, in my mind, I had really hated Molly because I thought she was evil, and she had did this thing where she could take over and poison minds, and how could somebody think that I would ever do anything but right for Tupac after I'd done so much good for Tupac at that point? How, basically the evil man was winning the war. So fast forward 20 years from then, someone I was doing an interview for shed some light on it. He was like, you think, because my whole thing was I had always wanted a conversation with Afeni so I could tell her that she'd been getting hornswoggled, that Molly was pulling her chains, that I'm the one that took care of your son, and I just wanted things to be right. And after she died, it really killed me because I never got that chance to make it right. And I felt bad. But an interviewer brought it to my attention because he had been interviewing so many people, and a lot of the people had the same story. So somewhere along the lines, you know, these legal teams and lawyers, they know how to fuck people. And this interviewer told me it wasn't too inconceivable, but that whole thing was a ploy. When she got on the phone and her knowing my character and to jump to that. And I'm like, damn, I got robbed from my master's without even knowing it. It took me 20 years to realize that shit was a scam. So basically, Afeni fucked me over, and Molly fucked me over, and I was their first target. I was the center of the snowball to go after and steal. They have everybody's pictures, everybody's videos, everybody gave everything to the estate on sympathy. The state gave back nothing. And all those people who run the state and own the estate, they didn't get bullets shot at them. They didn't get, they weren't in crazy situations at studios at 4 a.m. They never paid for, well, I can't say his mom didn't pay for him. She supported him and raised him. But so did I. And I've been robbed from. And I mean, I have a ton of experience from it. I had a ton of good times. But at the end of the day, I lost.
Wow.
I feel like, yeah. Does that make sense where I'm coming from?
Yeah, that's an incredible story. That's an incredible story. What? Okay, I'm going to be the fan here, and I'm going to. What did you have of his? Was it just the 2 songs? 15 You and Days of a Criminal?
Days of a Criminal was the first song he actually put his voice on. Clark Gable took him to a studio in San Francisco. I wasn't the engineer, but there were these ballers who wanted to be rappers. So they hired 2pac's to create a track. In other words, they paid for everything, and they paid him to write their lyrics and place them on tape so they could go back and record them. So really that work was a work for hire. That should belong to them right now. Maybe why we haven't heard it on any major release, Days of a Criminal. But it was a reference track, yes. And it was for, one guy is dead, the other 2 guys are around. But he wrote 4 parts. And yeah, it was a reference track, and the master to that ended up at my studio. I recorded some of it. I made copies for them when they needed it, and I had it for years. And I had another couple of recordings. One song he recorded, I forgot what it was, for him. And then he wrote a song called The Kids for a group of kids out of Oakland he was trying to produce. So he did the reference vocals for that. And we were going to remix those songs and put them on this tribute album, and that's what the one sheet said. So they used that one sheet against me to do the cease and desist and to come up with the phony lawsuit. And for me, I was so disgusted by it I got angry at times. I was just like, man, you can take this shit. I don't care. I don't care. I'm not trying to take from Tupac. I'm just trying to do the right thing. But it turns out there's more ruthless souls, and they're all rich now. Well, one of them's dead. Benny's dead.
So there's songs out there that we'll probably never hear.
If they have them, they're probably just, I mean, they're not studio quality. The Days of a Criminal probably floats around, but yeah, they definitely got songs because they took everything. But the record labels know where to draw the line. You know, if they don't have, if like for instance, that song, we know it's Tupac's voice, but it doesn't make it Tupac's song. They might have paid off the producer, but you know, there's so many other things around it. The stuff with me, they took it from me, but they didn't get me to sign any releases on it. So who knows what they're going to do with it. I believe there's stuff that's out there that we won't hear.
I ask everybody this, and I'll pass this for you in closing. We all have somebody who passed that we knew, and when we're sad about it, there's like a specific memory, typically, that makes us smile a little bit when you think about that person. Do you have one of those for Tupac? A make you smile memory?
I do. It's in the form of a story. Mind if I tell it?
I would love for you to tell it.
I've told it before, but it's kind of funny. Okay, so like I said, we were players, and you know, Tupac fell into the player role by default. When I told him what his girlfriend was doing, it broke his heart, and from that moment he became a player, and he started juggling the chicks without involving his heart. Well, on this particular day, I had an apartment, and he was there, and I invited these two girls to come over. And as usual, us guys kind of plan our attack, you know. I'm going to get on that one, you get on that one, she's going to try to do this, and you do that. And, you know, we're doing our thing to try to get in these girls' pants. And we're usually successful because we're good at it. But we always had these little huddles and stuff. And Tupac was supposed to get on the blonde one, and I was supposed to get on the brunette one. And we had it down. We knew what we were going to do. And so they come over. We started drinking some beer or whatever, and everybody's having fun. And, you know, it's kind of time for the Sharks to make their little attack. And the TV is on. And all of a sudden, a movie called Grease 2 is playing. And one of the girls noticed it. She says, "Oh, I love this song." And she starts singing, "Let's do it for our country, the red, white, and the blue." I'm like, what the fuck? And the other girl started singing. And then Tupac jumped in because he had a background in musical theater, so he knew the song. He started doing all the dance moves with these girls in choreography with the TV. And he just won them over and became their buddies, and he's singing this song out loud in show style. And I just sat back on the couch and said, now it's me and three bitches. So I was like, oh, God. And that moment is hard to describe, but it was a funny moment that kind of tells me, it kind of summed him up for me. He was always appeasing. He was a warm dude. Whatever you were into, he was into it bigger. And it wasn't about ganging up on these chicks and doing it that way. It was about doing it his way. And that was a fun moment because it showed me something. I was like, God, I didn't see it that way. And we ended up fucking the shit out of him. anyway.
Hey all, it's Jmix here, and I want to thank everybody that took the time to watch the video. If you liked it, go ahead and throw it a like, maybe even a comment down below. And if you really like my content, check out my Patreon. The link is down below. For $1 a month, you get all the live streams, unedited as soon as they happen, plus interviews in advance and other bonus content. The link is in the description. If not, you guys could always watch one of the videos to the side of me. See you on the next upload. One love, everybody.